When my daughter vanished 11 years ago, I thought I'd lost everything. But when she came back, she didn't want forgiveness, she wanted control. What she didn't know was that her own son held the proof that would destroy her. If you're watching this video, please like and subscribe to the channel and tell me in the comments where you're listening to my story of revenge from. I love seeing how far these stories of justice and redemption travel around the world. The last normal thing I remember is the sound of simmering soup. I was alone in my kitchen, late October, just before dusk. Carrots, onion, broth. I was thinking about something harmless, whether my knees were going to make it through another winter without a cane when my doorbell rang. By the time I opened that door, my old life was already over. I just didn't know it yet. My daughter was standing there. Laura. She hadn't called first. She hadn't warned me. She just showed up with a little boy and one backpack. "Mom, please," she said. "Just for the weekend. I need a break." Just for the weekend. That was the phrase. Calm. Casual. Like she was dropping off dry cleaning. The boy beside her didn't look up. He was 6 years old, small for his age, shoulders tight, rocking heel to toe, heel to toe, heel to toe. His hands were clamped so hard over his ears that his knuckles were white, even though no one was yelling, even though the porch was quiet. I knew his name. Of course I knew his name. I had seen him a few times a year, short visits, controlled visits. Visits where Laura always seemed impatient, always checking the clock before she was even in the door. His name is Noah. He is my grandson. And that night, I would learn what it means to inherit a life you did not agree to carry. "Laura," I said, confused. "A weekend?" "I'll call you Sunday," she said. She was already backing down my steps, not meeting my eyes. "I swear, I just need to sleep. I just need to breathe. Please, Mom, please." She didn't hug him. She didn't kneel down and tell him it was okay. She didn't kiss his forehead. She turned and walked away fast, like if she stayed even 5 more seconds she might lose her nerve. "Laura," I said again, louder this time, because something about the way she was moving, the way she wouldn't look back, made my stomach twist. "Laura, hold on. Wait, you can't just—" Her car door slammed. Taillights. Gone. And it was quiet again. Except for Noah. Noah was still on my porch, shoes on the welcome mat, rocking and rocking and rocking. His face was turned down, eyes on the floorboards. He didn't cry. He didn't call out for her. He didn't ask where she went. His whole body was a signal, and that signal was panic. I am going to say something that, if you've never lived it, you might not believe. I taught school for 38 years. I've dealt with kids mid-tantrum, kids mid-fight, kids throwing chairs. I have broken up brawls between 9-year-olds bigger than me. I thought I knew difficult. I did not know this. Because this wasn't disobedience. This was terror. Very quiet terror. "Noah," I said softly. "Honey, you want to come inside?" He didn't answer. He didn't move toward me. He didn't even look up at the sound of his own name. He just rocked harder. And here's where I need you to really understand the moment. I wasn't scared of him. I was scared of me. Because I realized, standing there in my doorway with soup burning on the stove and the sun going down, that I didn't actually know how to keep this child alive through the night. Not take care of him. Not to keep him happy. I mean, keep him safe until morning. I picked up the backpack. It was too light. Way too light for a weekend stay. That detail should have told me everything, but shock is a slow drug. You don't understand the shape of what's happening until it's already sealed. I held the door open. I didn't touch him. Something in me already understood that if I reached for him without warning, it would feel like an attack. After a long, shaking minute, Noah walked past me into my house without looking at me, still holding his ears. The soup on the stove had scorched. The whole kitchen smelled like burnt onion. I turned off the burner. Then the first night began. I will never forget that first night. He wouldn't eat. Laura had once told me, in passing, he only eats nuggets, so I tried chicken nuggets. He turned his head away like the sight of the plate physically hurt him. I tried macaroni and cheese. He gagged just from the smell. I tried toast. He pushed the plate so hard it skidded. "Are you thirsty?" I whispered. He rocked faster. He made a low humming sound in his throat, this steady little engine of distress. He didn't reach for the water unless I set the cup on the floor and backed away. Toothbrushing was worse. I lifted the toothbrush. I did not even touch his mouth, and he screamed. People think scream means loud. No, this was an animal sound. This was pain. If you had heard it, every instinct you have would have lit up red. I dropped the toothbrush. He stopped screaming. His whole body shook. "Okay," I whispered, hands up, showing him I wasn't going to try again. Okay, not tonight." Bedtime was a disaster all by itself. I tucked in the blanket. He ripped it off. I tried again, softer. He clawed at his own arms like the fabric was burning him, so I stopped. I put the blanket at the end of the bed and sat in the hall with the door cracked and the lights low. He did not sleep. He lay there in the dark, on top of the sheets, eyes open, humming that same low sound, over and over and over. And I sat in a chair outside the door at 71 years old and stayed awake all night because I was terrified that if I closed my eyes, he'd stop and I wouldn't notice until it was too late. That was just for the weekend. That was the lie I was handed at my own front door. And if you're still here listening, if you feel that in your stomach right now, I need you to hear me when I tell you that weekend never ended. Before we go on, before I tell you what happened next, the phone call on Christmas Eve, the social worker at my door, the police officer who almost grabbed him in a grocery store, my daughter coming back years later with a lawyer and forged custody papers, please take 1 second and subscribe to this channel. It tells me I'm not shouting alone into the dark, and it's the only reason I can keep sitting here and telling stories nobody ever tells women my age. Now let me ask you something, and I want your honest answer. In that moment at the door, when Laura said, "just for the weekend," and drove away, what do you believe she was really doing? A. She was overwhelmed and planned to come back for him. B. She already knew she was never coming back. There is a moment in every life when you understand that no one is coming to save you. For me, that moment happened on December 24th, a little after 7 p.m., standing in my kitchen with the phone to my ear and the smell of burned sugar in the air. It had been long enough by then that I knew something was wrong. Just for the weekend had already stretched into days that felt like a fever dream. I had left messages. I had tried to sound calm. I had tried to sound stern. I had tried pleading. I had said, "Laura, you need to call me back. You have to tell me what his routine is. You have to tell me what he eats. I need to know what upsets him. I am not guessing about your son. Nothing." But on Christmas Eve, the phone finally rang. I didn't think. My body just moved. I grabbed it with hands that wouldn't stay steady, and I said, "Laura, thank God. When are you coming to get him? He needs you. I need to know what I am supposed to." She didn't let me finish. Her voice was flat. I don't mean tired the way a working mother is tired. I mean emptied, sanded down to something that didn't even try to sound loving. "I can't do this," she said. At first I thought I'd misheard. "What?" I can't do it. He's yours." Just like that. 2 words, and my entire life changed legal shape with no paperwork, no warning, no conversation. "He's yours." I remember I went very quiet. It wasn't noble. It was survival. My body knew if I reacted big, she'd hang up. So I said, very softly, "Laura, listen to me. You don't mean that. You are exhausted. You are overwhelmed. You need a break. I understand that. I truly do. But this is still your son. You don't get to just—" "I tried," she said, loud enough that I had to pull the phone away from my ear. "You think I didn't try? I tried. I tried, Mom. You have no idea how hard it is. You don't understand what it's like with him. I can't breathe. I can't live. I can't do it anymore. I can't. Laura." "He's yours now," she said. "You're better at this. You like this kind of thing. You're good with kids. You always were. You're better. I'm not built for it." That last sentence is the one that actually broke something in me. I'm not built for it. She said it like he was a machine that required special training she hadn't bothered to get, and I was some technician on call. I said, "Laura, listen to me. You do not get to declare this over the phone and disappear. That is not how motherhood works." There was a silence that felt like a door closing. Then she said, almost calmly, almost relieved, "I just did." And the line went dead. When people talk about shock, they make it sound like screaming and throwing things. The truth is worse. My mind didn't race. My mind stopped, froze, like a screen. I just stood there, with the phone still against my ear and the dial tone going, and didn't move. I don't know how long I stayed like that. A minute, 10. Long enough for the cookies in the oven to go from golden at the edges to black. Long enough for that bitter, burnt sugar smell to start curling up into the kitchen lights. When I finally moved, it wasn't graceful. I turned off the oven, I pulled out the tray, I set it down too hard and it clattered, and then my legs just, quit. That's the only way to describe it. They went out from under me and I sat down on the floor like someone had cut the strings that were holding me up. This is the part no one tells you about being the last reliable adult in the family. There is no place to put your collapse. You are not allowed to fall apart in public because they will call you unstable. You are not allowed to fall apart in front of the child because you are the structure that is keeping their world from shattering. You are not allowed to fall apart alone because if you do, no one will come get you off the floor. So you sit there in the middle of your own kitchen, legs useless, heart beating so hard it hurts, and you learn what it feels like to realize, at 71 years old, that you are now the mother again whether you asked for that job or not. I didn't cry pretty. I shook. My hands shook so badly I had to press them flat against the cabinets. My chest hurt. My throat made these small, open sounds I didn't recognize as mine. This wasn't sadness. This was impact, the body absorbing a hit. Because here is the truth I understood in that exact moment. She wasn't coming back. This wasn't, "I need a break." This wasn't just for the weekend. This wasn't, "I'll pick him up Sunday." This was abandonment, a full handoff, an attempt to erase herself from the paperwork of responsibility. She wasn't asking me for help. She was exiting the story. And that means I was now the one responsible, not just for food and sleep and school and calm, but for keeping him out of the system, for keeping records, for answering questions from doctors and teachers and, later, people with badges, for explaining to people in offices why he lives with me and not with his mother, and doing it in a way that doesn't get him flagged, or taken, or labeled unplaceable. Do you understand? In a single sentence, she had turned me from grandmother to legal risk manager. I don't know how long I sat there. But I do know this. I wasn't alone. That surprised me. Because I hadn't heard him come in. I felt a presence in the doorway, and when I lifted my head, he was there. Noah. He didn't rush at me. He didn't shout, "Grandma, what's wrong?" Like a child in a movie, he stood and watched. Long enough, steady enough, that I understood what was happening. He was taking me in. He was logging this. He was observing, the same way he watches ceiling fans, fluorescent lights, the way people's mouths move when they lie. He was registering the shape of me on the floor. Then he did something that, to this day, is the reason I will never allow anyone to tell me what he feels or does not feel. He turned, walked to the counter, reached for the little blue plastic cup I had been using for him because it was light and didn't clink against his teeth and didn't frighten him. He carried it back, crossed the kitchen, and set it on the floor beside my knee. He didn't touch me. He didn't speak. He placed water within my reach, and then, without looking for praise, without checking whether I would drink it, he went back down the hallway and curled himself into the corner he'd chosen as his safe place. That was not random. That was care. Everyone loves to talk about children like Noah as if they are unreachable, sealed off, unfeeling, in their own world. I need you to hear me. That is lazy thinking from people who only understand loud emotions. My grandson, who had almost no words then, understood in that moment that I was not okay, and he did the one thing he knew. He brought me what I bring him when he is not okay. Water. Near, not forced. Within reach, not pushed against his mouth. That is love. That is attachment. That is awareness. I sat there on the floor, staring at that cup, and something inside me locked into place. Not calm. I wasn't calm, but decided. I understood the terms now. Nobody was coming. Nobody was stepping back into this doorway saying, "I'm sorry, I panicked, let me fix it." It was me and this boy and a world that would not make room for either of us unless I forced it to. That was the night I stopped waiting for my daughter to ring the bell. That was the night I stopped being temporary. That was the night the story stopped being, "My daughter needed a break," and became, "My daughter walked away," and I did not. I picked up the cup. I drank the water he brought me. Then I got up off the floor and started writing everything down. The first official threat didn't come from my daughter, it came from the system she hid behind. 2 weeks after Laura vanished, there was a knock at my door that sounded too calm to be friendly. It was that kind of knock that says, "We already know something about you." I wiped my hands on my apron and opened the door. A woman stood there, 40s, neat hair, slate gray coat, clipboard. The kind of clipboard that doesn't mean help, it means evidence. "Mrs. Cole?" she asked. "Yes." "Dana, with Child Protective Services. I received a report concerning your grandson." The word report drained the warmth out of my kitchen. I stepped aside. "Come in." She entered like she owned the air itself. Her tone was courteous, but her eyes were busy collecting. Walls, floors, smells. My life reduced to details. "You're 71? "Yes." "And you live alone?" "Yes." She clicked her pen. The report mentioned concerns about supervision and your ability to provide care for a neurodivergent minor. In plain English, someone said I was too old. "Would you like to tell me who filed that report?" I asked. "I'm not permitted to disclose that." "Of course not. But I didn't need disclosure to recognize the fingerprints. My daughter, the same daughter who'd left him with me, was now laying the groundwork to make sure she looked blameless if the state decided to step in." "I'd like to see the child," Dana said. "He's asleep," I told her. "That's fine. I can take a quick look." "No," I said quietly. "If you wake him without preparation, you'll frighten him. You'll get a reaction, you'll misinterpret as aggression, and then you'll write it down wrong. You'll hurt him with your pen." Her eyebrows lifted. "Mrs. Cole, I have the right to." "I'm aware of your rights," I said. "And I'm aware of his needs. You'll wait until he wakes up." Something in my voice made her pause. Maybe it was the calm, maybe the lack of apology. She followed me down the hallway, slower now. Noah wasn't asleep after all. He was curled on the carpet near the bookshelf, knees up, palms pressed to his ears, his little body swaying in that rhythm that calmed him when sound felt too big. His eyes flicked toward us but didn't land. "This is Noah," I said softly. "He knows you're here." Dana scribbled something. I could feel her judgment breathing. I had lived long enough to know what she was writing, phrases like detached affect, avoidant behavior, possible sensory overload. They'd turn his silence into a symptom, his calm into pathology. "You see," I said, forcing my voice steady, "he's safe. He's regulated. You don't need to test him." Her pen slowed. "You're documenting his routines?" I almost smiled. "More than you think." In the kitchen, I showed her the binder, a thick one. Blue plastic spine, neatly labeled tabs. I had started it the night my daughter said, "He's yours." It began as survival, but it had become a shield. "This is his daily structure," I said, flipping to the first section. "He wakes at 5:45, needs 5 minutes alone before I speak. Breakfast, 2 scrambled eggs, not browned. Toast cut diagonally, not across. Plate must be white, no patterns. Milk in a blue plastic cup, never glass it echoes against his teeth." She blinked. I kept going. "He tolerates oatmeal only on rainy days. Something about the sound, I think. Shoes must be tied twice, not once. He sits in the back seat behind the driver. The other side gives him motion sickness." I turned another page. "Here is every call I made to his mother." I showed her the neat log. Date, time, duration, result. No answer. Voicemail. Disconnected. A line of silence in ink. Her pen stopped moving. "Here," I continued, "is every meltdown trigger I've identified. Lighting, textures, voices. These are the strategies that work. Weighted blanket, but only if he puts it on himself. No touch without invitation. If you touch him first, it isn't comfort, it's assault. And then you'll think he's violent when he's just defending himself. Dana looked at me differently then, not kindly, not yet, but with caution, the kind that comes when the script doesn't match reality. "Do you have legal guardianship papers?" she asked finally. "No," I said. His mother left him informally. "I'm retaining an attorney to formalize it." That word attorney landed. Her posture changed. Bureaucrats know when someone is willing to fight in their language. "I see," she said. "For now, I'll leave him in your care." "For now," I repeated. "I've lived long enough to know what those two words mean. They mean we can still take him." After she left, I locked the door and sat with the binder. My hands were trembling, not from fear, but from clarity. I had realized something vital. Love wasn't enough. I needed evidence. I needed paperwork stronger than rumors, thicker than lies, heavier than gossip. That night, I began writing my own record, not just of Noah, but of me. I wrote, "Primary caregiver in good health, independent in daily tasks, maintains sanitary home, fully oriented, no cognitive decline." I used their language. Their words were weapons. I was learning to fire back. Noah came into the kitchen as I wrote. Barefoot, silent, watching. He tilted his head at the binder. Then, without speaking, he picked up my pen and drew a small square on the corner of the page. Just a box, perfectly aligned. I realized later he'd seen me drawing boxes to organize notes, so he was adding one, making order out of chaos, his way of saying, "I understand." When he went back to bed, I sat there for a long time, staring at that little square. That single line of graphite meant more to me than any signature. It was proof that he trusted me, that he was watching how I fought for him, even if he couldn't say it aloud. From that night forward, every time fear tried to crawl into my chest, I thought of that square. I thought, if my daughter's voice ever tries to erase him, this boy's marks will remain. I didn't know then that the next knock on my door would come from a different kind of threat, not the state, not paperwork, but a lawyer with my daughter's handwriting on a petition. But that's later. For now, all you need to know is this: the woman they called too old was just getting started. It arrived on a Wednesday morning, thin as a threat, and just as quiet, a white envelope tucked between bills and catalogs. At first, I thought it was a credit card offer. Then I saw the letterhead. Coleman, Briggs, and Weaver, attorneys at law. For a second, my body didn't even register fear, just recognition, like seeing a snake you already knew lived under your porch. I opened it carefully, sitting at the kitchen table where Noah was drawing circles with his colored pencils. The paper smelled of ink and expensive toner. Notice of petition for custody and guardianship, it said. Filed by Laura Benson, biological mother of the minor, Noah Benson. The words turned cold in my hands. My daughter had finally found a new way to abandon him, this time through paperwork. The letter stated that concerns regarding the minor's welfare under the current caregiver required immediate legal review. The hearing was set for 2 weeks. 2 weeks to defend 11 years of love. I remember I folded the letter in half and looked across the table. Noah was tracing the same circle, again and again, steady, perfect. "You like things even, don't you?" I whispered. He didn't answer, but he looked up at me once long enough that I knew he had noticed my shaking hands. That night, I called an attorney. His name was Henry Walsh, mid-60s, calm voice, the kind of man who'd seen too much to be easily startled. When I told him the situation, he was silent for a long time. Then he said, "Do you have documentation?" "I have a binder," I said. He chuckled softly. "You have no idea how much that matters." The next morning, I brought it to his office, a small brick building with a flag out front and a smell of coffee that had been brewing since 7 a.m. He flipped through the binder, page by page, the way a priest might handle scripture. The further he read, the straighter his back became. "Mrs. Cole," he said finally, "this isn't just documentation, this is a case." He began taking notes. "We'll need affidavits from his doctor, therapist, school counselor, anyone who's interacted with him regularly. Has your daughter had contact with him in the last year?" "No," I said, "not since the night she left him on my porch." He stopped writing. "You can testify to that?" I have logs, calls, dates, even the CPS visit, everything. Good, he said. We'll need to prove abandonment, incapacity to parent, and continuity of care. From what I see, you've already done the work. But his calm didn't reach me, because I knew Laura. My daughter could turn tears into weapons, she could twist neglect into victimhood. The system didn't know her like I did, the way she could look fragile while cutting you open. That night, I found Noah sitting in the hallway surrounded by papers. He'd taken my binder apart. At first, I panicked. Noah, you can't, these are important. Then I saw what he was doing. He was organizing, aligning every sheet by its edge, matching tabs by color, stacking them in perfect precision. He looked up once, eyes clear, and said almost inaudibly, "Right order." It was the first full sentence he had spoken in months. I sat down beside him on the floor. "Yes," I said, my voice breaking, "right order." When he finished, he handed me the last page, my own handwriting from the night after CPS came. Caregiver condition, alert, mobile, oriented. His small fingers tapped that line twice, deliberate. Then he smiled a flicker, gone as quickly as it came, but enough to light something inside me I thought I'd lost. The next 2 weeks blurred into preparation. Statements, forms, notarized signatures. Henry coached me like a soldier before battle. They'll ask if you're too old. Say age isn't impairment. They'll ask if he'd be better with his mother. Say he already is. The night before the hearing, I couldn't sleep. I sat at the kitchen table again, binder open, house silent except for the hum of the refrigerator. I thought about the first night Noah came here, how he wouldn't eat, how I'd felt useless and afraid. And then I looked at the binder proof of every small victory. The meals eaten, the meltdowns survived. The trust built inch by inch. When the morning came, I dressed the way I used to for school meetings. Navy blazer, clean collar, calm expression. But inside, I carried the same quiet fury every mother carries when someone threatens her child. The courtroom was smaller than I imagined. Laura was already there, sitting with her lawyer, a younger woman with sharp heels and sharper lipstick. Laura looked fragile, pretty in a hollow way. She didn't meet my eyes. When she finally glanced over, she gave me that practiced tremble of the chin that used to make people rush to comfort her. Henry leaned toward me. "Don't respond. Let the evidence talk." The judge, a woman maybe in her 50s, looked over her glasses. "We are here to determine appropriate guardianship for the minor, Noah Benson." Laura's lawyer went first. Her voice dripped sympathy. "My client deeply regrets the past misunderstanding. She was struggling emotionally when she left her son temporarily in her mother's care. She's ready to resume parental duties." The judge turned to me. "Mrs. Cole, is that true?" I opened the binder. The sound of the clip echoed across the room. "No, Your Honor," I said softly. This was not temporary. She told me on December 24th, "He's yours now. I've kept every record since." I laid out the log, the missed calls, the CPS report, the therapy notes. Henry spoke next, steady and clear. "This isn't about sentiment. This is continuity, stability, and documented abandonment." At one point, the judge leaned forward. "Mrs. Cole, may I ask why you kept such extensive notes?" I looked at her and told the truth. "Because I learned that the system doesn't believe women like me unless we write everything down." There was a silence that filled the whole room. Even Laura stopped pretending to cry. When it was over, the judge didn't deliberate long. "Guardianship remains with Mrs. Cole pending full custody review. Temporary restraining order on removal. The court acknowledges abandonment and continuity of care." Those words hit me harder than I expected. Not triumph, something quieter. Relief that no one could unwrite what we had built. Outside, the winter air was sharp and bright. Henry shook my hand. "You did it," he said. But when I looked down, Noah was standing on the courthouse steps, holding the blue cup I'd brought for him that morning. He tilted it toward me as if to remind me our rituals still mattered, even after war. And for the first time in a long time, I let myself breathe. Because I understood what the judge had really given me that day wasn't just custody, it was permission to stop proving that love counts as evidence. For a few quiet months after the hearing, life almost resembled normal. Noah and I built our own rhythm morning tea, Soft music instead of alarms, the binder replaced by routines that no longer needed to be written down. For the first time in years, he started humming again, not as a shield, but as something close to joy. He'd hum while arranging his toy trains, lining them with perfect symmetry, or while helping me water the plants. It wasn't loud, but it was alive. Then, one morning in April, a new letter arrived. It wasn't from court. It was from a law firm I didn't recognize, Sheldon, Marks & Klein, representing a corporate client. The language was distant, polite, and lethal. They claimed an interest in an intellectual property venture associated with the minor, Noah Benson. I didn't understand it at first, not until I reached the final paragraph. Our client has reason to believe the minor's software prototype, developed during his time under your care, constitutes joint ownership with Miss Laura Benson. Joint ownership. That was the day I realized my daughter hadn't lost. She was regrouping. I called Henry immediately. He was quiet for a long time, then sighed. She's shifting strategy. Custody didn't work, so now she's going after the money. Tell me about this software. It's not mine to tell, I said. It's Noah's, but it's real. That evening, I sat beside Noah at his desk. His computer screen was filled with strings of code and a small window flashing verification complete in green. He was testing something new. I asked softly, "What does it do this time?" He turned the monitor toward me. "It checks if a document is real. Any document." His voice had grown steadier since the court. He didn't speak often, but when he did, it was precise. "Can it tell if something's forged?" I asked. He nodded once. "Every pixel leaves a trail." I didn't fully understand, but I didn't need to. I saw the clarity in his eyes, the same laser focus he had when organizing papers, except now it had evolved into something larger. He had built a way to defend himself, the way I had defended him with documentation. Only his weapon was digital, invisible, and incorruptible. A week later, Henry called. "Their attorney is claiming your daughter provided creative input. They want profit rights. How much has the program made?" "None yet," I said. "But it will. He's already been approached by a small startup to license it." Henry exhaled. "Then we need to protect it before she files an injunction. Do you still have Noah's logs? Proof he created it?" I smiled bitterly. "Henry, I have everything." The days that followed blurred into meetings, patent applications, witness statements. I sat beside Noah through every one, his headphones on, eyes on his tablet, while I handled the noise of adults who thought they understood what genius looked like. Then, one night, I heard the faint hum of his computer after midnight. When I went in, he was scanning something, an image of Laura's signature on the guardianship petition. On the screen, a red warning flashed. "Forgery detected. Signature mismatch. 42% probability of imitation." He looked at me calmly, not triumphant, not frightened. "Grandma," he said, "I can prove it." It took me a moment to realize what he meant. He wasn't just talking about his software. He was talking about everything. The lies, the papers, the years. Henry nearly dropped his coffee when I told him. "You're saying the signature on the petition your daughter's own filing is forged?" "Not just saying," I answered. "Noah's software confirmed it." Within a week, Henry filed a counter motion with digital evidence attached. The hearing was set for May 12th. That morning, the courtroom felt colder than before. Laura sat at the table, arms crossed, her lawyer whispering urgently beside her. She looked smaller now, less polished, like the mirror had started telling her the truth. Henry stood first. "Your Honor," he said, "we have new evidence regarding the authenticity of documents filed in the previous custody case. These were signed under the name of Miss Actions Benson, but, according to independent verification, were not executed by her hand." The judge frowned. "You're alleging fraud?" "Not alleging," Henry said. "Demonstrating." He motioned to Noah. My heart stopped. The judge leaned forward. "The minor will testify?" Henry shook his head. "He will demonstrate, Your Honor, a live verification of the documents in question." The courtroom lights dimmed slightly as the bailiff set up the projector. Noah's laptop screen filled the wall, lines of code streaming like rainfall, then a scan of the original petition. His fingers moved fast, silent, sure. A bar on the screen filled green to red, then froze at 41.8%. He turned the laptop toward the judge, his voice steady. If it's above 20, it's fake. For a moment, nobody breathed. Then the judge looked at Laura. Miss Benson, would you care to explain? Laura's lawyer whispered frantically, but Laura's face told the truth before her mouth did. Her color drained, her jaw tightening. Henry stepped forward. This isn't just about a signature, it's a pattern. She forged her own petition, the same one that claimed Mrs. Cole was unfit, the same one that claimed this child was neglected. This, Your Honor, is fraud against the court, against the child, and against truth itself. Laura stood, her voice cracking. He's lying. You think that boy can know? The judge slammed her gavel. Sit down. The room went silent, except for Noah's soft breathing. He looked straight at the judge and said, The computer doesn't lie. People do. That sentence echoed longer than any verdict. By the end of the day, the judge ordered a formal investigation. Laura's assets were frozen pending inquiry. The intellectual property was declared solely Noah's, guardianship permanent awarded to me. Outside, the wind was cool, sunlight sharp. Henry shook Noah's hand. You didn't just protect your work, he said. You protected your name. Noah only shrugged, his gaze on the courthouse steps. I just fixed the order. Later that night, I found him asleep at his desk, computer still humming, a small message glowing on the screen, truth verified. I stood there, thinking of all the years I had spent fighting with paper and signatures, with pens and proofs. My grandson had taken that same burden and turned it into light. And for the first time, I realized I wasn't just raising a child anymore. I was witnessing the beginning of something extraordinary, a legacy built from the very lies that tried to destroy us. As I turned off the monitor, I whispered into the quiet room, You did it, Noah. You made the truth undeniable. He didn't stir, but his lips curved faintly, like he was still dreaming of perfect lines of everything finally in the right order. The summer after the court case was the first time I realized what peace actually sounded like. Not silence. Noah didn't live in silence. His world was made of quiet patterns, the hum of his computer, the rhythmic tapping of his fingers when he was thinking, the soft rustle of paper as he organized his ever-growing folders of ideas. But the air in our home changed. The fear that had lived behind every locked door finally thinned, replaced by something almost gentle trust. For weeks, he worked at his desk without saying much. He was writing code, always code, and every once in a while he would pause to test a new sound file or click through spreadsheets of numbers that made no sense to me. Then, one morning in late July, he came to the kitchen holding a flash drive. It's done, he said simply. What is? I asked. He hesitated, searching for the right words. The system, it's ready to sell. He wasn't bragging. He never did. He said it like a fact of weather. Henry helped us file the patents and negotiate with the company that had been courting Noah since the hearing. They specialized in cybersecurity and digital verification, exactly what his software did, only his version was faster and cleaner. At 16, my grandson was sitting across from executives who'd built empires on algorithms. They underestimated him the same way everyone always had, and just like me, they learned the cost of that mistake. The deal closed in early September. $3.2 million wired to a trust account in Noah's name. I stared at the number on the statement until the paper went blurry. That kind of money had never existed in our family. It didn't feel like wealth, it felt like redemption written in zeros. Noah didn't celebrate the way people expected. When the company sent a congratulatory letter with gold trim, he ignored it. Instead, he asked if he could go to the library. He wanted to start researching autistic hiring structures. I remember laughing softly. You're 16, sweetheart. Most boys your age would be buying cars. He looked at me, calm as always. I don't drive well, but I see patterns. People like me can do that. That sentence stayed in my mind for days. People like me. He wasn't ashamed anymore. He was claiming his difference as power. I realized the story wasn't just about survival anymore, it was about legacy. A month later, I walked into his room and found a whiteboard covered in names and arrows. At the top, he'd written, Horizon, a place for focused minds. It was a business plan, his plan. He wanted to build a company that hired autistic adults to test and verify digital systems, the same way he did. Because, he said, we see mistakes that others miss. When I told Henry, he smiled. He's not just protecting truth anymore. He's building a future out of it. Setting up the company wasn't easy. Banks wanted endless signatures. Forms needed guardianship approval. Every door asked for proof that I wasn't too old and that he wasn't too young. But every time I felt exhaustion rising, I would look at him, shoulders squared, gaze steady, and I knew why I was still fighting. By winter, Horizon opened its first small office downtown. 4 desks, second-hand computers, and a sign on the door printed by Noah himself. On opening day, 3 new employees arrived. Each one, autistic. Each one had been told somewhere in their life that they weren't a good fit. Noah didn't give them interviews in the usual sense. He handed them simple tasks, a string of messy data, a corrupted image, and watched how they saw. Within minutes, he knew who belonged. He didn't talk much during those sessions, but afterward he told me, "They work like I do. They fix order." At the end of that first week, he brought home a single sheet of paper. "Payroll," he said. "They get paid every Friday. No delays." I thought of all the systems that had failed him, schools, doctors, courts, and how he had quietly built his own. The media found us soon after. A journalist from a technology magazine wanted to interview him, calling him the boy who built truth. He refused. "The work matters," he said, "not the noise." But one article still appeared, written by a reporter who had attended the court hearing. The headline read, "Teen Proves Mother's Fraud, Turns Trauma into Tech Revolution." The story went viral. My phone filled with messages from strangers thanking us for showing that justice could still exist in quiet houses. Laura's name was mentioned only once, currently under investigation for falsified documents. I didn't celebrate her downfall. I didn't even feel anger anymore. There was only a vast, calm distance between us. The wound she left no longer bled, it had healed into something stronger. One afternoon, as the first snow of December began to fall, Noah came into the kitchen holding a folder. Inside was a letter of incorporation for Horizon, with both our names listed: Noah Benson, founder and CEO, Vivian Cole, guardian and executive advisor. I smiled, tracing the embossed seal. "Why put me on it?" I asked. He shrugged. "You started the binder." For the first time in years, I laughed until I cried. We celebrated that night with pizza and milk, because that was what he liked. He sat at the table in his neat order, 2 slices cut into squares, cup on the right. I asked him what he would do with all that money. He thought for a long time. Then he said, "I want to build a fund, for kids like me who don't have grandmas." That sentence nearly broke me. In February, we filed the paperwork to create the Cole Foundation for Neurodiverse Futures. It offered small grants to families raising autistic children, funding adaptive tools, legal support, and education. Within 6 months, applications came from all over the country. Mothers wrote about sons who reminded them of Noah. Grandparents sent pictures of children building robots in basements. Every letter carried a piece of the fight I thought we had fought alone. The day the first foundation check was mailed, Noah placed his hand on the envelope and said quietly, "It's proof." "Of what?" I asked. "That good can repeat, too." That night, I sat by the window watching snow drift against the glass. I thought of every door I had opened in fear, the social worker, the court, the lawyer, the judge, and how each had led somehow to this moment. For years, I'd been terrified that Noah's story would end like mine had begun, with abandonment and silence. But now, as his company grew and his laughter returned in small, careful bursts, I realized something simple and extraordinary. He had rewritten not just his life, but mine. I used to think justice meant punishment. Now I knew better. Justice was continuity, the good that keeps moving forward even after the bad has burned out. When I turned off the lights that night, I looked at the binder still sitting on the shelf. The pages were worn, the ink fading. I almost put it away, but I couldn't. It was more than record now. It was scripture. As I closed the window, I heard Noah's voice from his room, faint but clear. "Grandma, did you know the stars make patterns too?" I smiled into the dark. "Yes, love, I said. You just have to know how to see them. The years that followed were not quiet, but they were full. By the time Noah turned 18, Horizon had outgrown its first office. What began as 4 desks and a dream became a network of 22 employees in 3 states, each one hired not in spite of their differences, but because of them. I would visit sometimes, sitting quietly in the corner, while Noah gave soft, careful instructions. He never raised his voice. He didn't have to. People listened to him because he spoke truth the way others breathed. He had grown taller, leaner, his movements still deliberate, but there was a calm certainty to him now. He had learned how to translate his world for others without softening it. And when journalists came again, calling him a boy genius, he corrected them. Not boy, not genius, just someone who sees patterns. But what most people didn't see was the way he still left the blue cup by my place at the table every morning. Habit, ritual, a quiet bond between the two of us that success hadn't erased. One late autumn evening, while I was sorting through old papers, I found the first binder, the one that had saved us both. Its pages had yellowed, the tabs were curling. I thought about throwing it away, but I couldn't. It wasn't just proof anymore, it was history, proof of love in bureaucratic form. That same week, Henry called me. His voice sounded older, slower, but steady. "Vivian," he said, "Laura's sentencing came through." For a long time, I didn't answer. I thought I had stopped caring about that part of the story, but when I finally spoke, my voice trembled. How long? 18 months for falsifying federal documents, probation after that. No contact order remains in effect. I thanked him and hung up. Then I sat by the window, watching the evening settle. There was no satisfaction in the news, just a hollow sort of peace. Justice, maybe, or closure in its plainest form. Later that night, Noah came into the living room. "You look tired," he said. "I am," I admitted, "but not in a bad way." He nodded, then handed me a folder. "We got the grant." "The foundation?" "Yes, enough to open the second training center, Chicago this time." I looked at the printed document and smiled. "You keep rewriting the same story," I told him, "taking what broke us and turning it into structure." He tilted his head slightly, thinking. "That's what code does," he said. "It fixes logic until it works." There are moments in a life that don't look like triumphs from the outside. No applause, no headlines, but inside, something sacred shifts. Watching him stand there, taller than me now, calm and unshakable, I realized I had been raising not just a child, but a truth that refused to die. A few months later, Noah asked me to come to a company event, his first public talk. He hated crowds, but this time, he said, it mattered. The room was full of young engineers, most of them autistic, many with parents sitting nervously in the back. When he stepped on stage, the lights made him squint, but he didn't flinch. He began with the story he once wouldn't let anyone tell. "When I was small," he said, "I couldn't look people in the eye. I couldn't stand loud sounds. The world didn't make sense. But my grandmother taught me something. When people don't believe you, write it down. That's how truth survives." There was no trembling in his voice. No theatrics, just calm conviction. Now I run a company that verifies information for governments and hospitals. But really, we verify people. We give them proof that what they see, what they live, what they survive is real. That's what truth is. It's not data, it's persistence. When he stepped off the stage, the applause came slow, then louder, rippling like a tide. I watched him bow his head slightly, uncomfortable with the noise but patient enough to endure it. Afterward, he found me in the crowd. "Was that okay?" he asked. "It was perfect," I said, and for once he believed me the first time. That night we walked home through the city streets. The lights reflected on the wet pavement, long and bright. Noah looked up, tracing patterns in the street lamps like constellations. "Grandma," he said quietly, "do you ever wonder what would have happened if Mom hadn't left me with you?" I stopped walking. "Every day," I said, "and every day I'm grateful she did." He didn't reply, but I saw his shoulders ease, as though a weight he'd been carrying had finally been set down. As the years passed, Horizon grew beyond what either of us imagined. The foundation expanded across the country. Families wrote letters, thanking us for helping them find the courage to fight their own battles. Some sent pictures, children in classrooms, teens at computers, grandparents holding them close. Every envelope carried a familiar echo, because of you. But what they never knew was that the real story wasn't about victory or technology or even justice. It was about endurance, the kind that begins with a woman too old to start over and a boy too quiet to be heard, who together learned that truth, once built, doesn't crumble. I turned 79, the year Noah was invited to speak at the United Nations. He insisted I come with him. Sitting there in that grand hall, surrounded by flags and polished floors, I realized we had come full circle, from a burned pot of soup on a December night to this. When he began his speech, he didn't read from notes. "I built my first system to prove a document was fake," he said, "but what I really wanted was to prove my grandmother was right." I closed my eyes for a moment, letting his words settle. They weren't for the world, they were for me. Later, when the crowd rose in applause, he looked out across the room and found me in the audience. For the first time since he was a child, he waved. Not a small gesture, not a flicker, but a real wave, confident and certain. I waved back, and in that instant, I knew that every page, every sleepless night, every moment of fear had been worth it. Because the boy I once carried through storms had carried us both somewhere higher than either of us could have climbed alone. When the lights dimmed and the room emptied, he came to me quietly. "Grandma," he said, "you taught me how to find order, but you also taught me that some things like love don't need proof." I smiled, taking his hand. "That's the only truth that never changes." And as we stepped outside into the cool evening, I looked up at the city sky, faint stars hidden by light, and thought, yes, they're still there. Even when you can't see them, they remain constant, patient, waiting for someone who knows how to look. When I turned 80, Noah surprised me with something I never expected: a house by the coast. Not grand or showy, just a 2-story cottage tucked between dunes and wind-shaped grass, where you could hear the sea before you saw it. He said he wanted me close to calm things. "You've lived in noise for too long," he told me. At first I resisted. The old house carried too much history, the smell of burnt soup, the worn binder, the hum of his childhood computers. But he had already signed the papers, smiling shyly the way he did when he'd made up his mind. "It's yours," he said. "You gave me a home when I had none. Now it's my turn." The first night there, I sat on the porch watching the tide move in and out. The sea made a sound like breathing, steady and infinite. I realized I hadn't slept to that kind of rhythm since before my husband died. For the first time in years, my shoulders dropped. The fear that used to live in my bones, the fear that someone would come to take Noah away, had nowhere left to hide. He visited every weekend, sometimes bringing his employees, sometimes coming alone. They'd sit at the kitchen table, laptops open, while I made tea. They called me Miss Cole, but Noah always corrected them. "It's Grandma," he'd say, not smiling but not needing to. And so I became Grandma to a dozen young adults who'd once been told they didn't belong anywhere. I watched them work, heads bent over code, speaking in short bursts of clarity, their sentences half finished but perfectly understood among themselves. It felt like witnessing another language, the language of precision, of trust without pretense. And I thought, maybe this is what love looks like when it grows up. It builds systems that protect others from being erased. By spring, Horizon had expanded internationally. He was invited to conferences, awarded distinctions, even nominated for humanitarian prizes. But Noah never chased attention. "Recognition is noise," he said once. "It distracts from patterns." Yet he began to understand that sometimes the world needed symbols to see change. When a major news network asked for a documentary, he almost refused until I told him the truth. "People need to see you, Noah, not because of what you built, but because of what it means. You turned pain into structure. You made justice measurable." He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "Will you do it with me?" They filmed for 3 months. Cameras followed us through the office, through the foundation, even through the beach house. They wanted footage of our everyday lives, the simple rituals that still anchored us. the blue cup at breakfast, my handwritten notes, his organized desk. I thought it would feel intrusive, but it didn't. It felt necessary, like leaving a record behind for someone who might need it one day. When the documentary aired, it was called Proof of Love. The title made me laugh at first, too sentimental, too neat, but when I saw it, I understood why. It wasn't about technology. It was about endurance. About two people who refused to let silence define them. The world responded with an outpouring I could never have imagined. Letters arrived from countries I'd never visit, from mothers who whispered thank you into the page, from sons who said they finally understood their own minds were not broken, just built differently. One letter came from a woman named Rachel, not my daughter. Another one who wrote, "I thought I had lost my child to a world that doesn't listen. Your story reminded me that we can still teach the world how to hear." I kept that letter on my nightstand. In the years that followed, Noah built a research wing dedicated to accessibility in artificial intelligence. "Machines should learn empathy too," he said. And though I didn't quite grasp the science, I believed in the soul behind it. He hired ethicists, educators, and autistic researchers who'd been shut out of their fields. The company thrived, but more importantly, it healed. Every new project felt like a quiet apology to every child who'd ever been misunderstood. As my health began to slow, I noticed how gently he adjusted around me. He moved the meetings earlier, cooked on weekends, learned to brew tea exactly the way I liked it. When I told him I worried about leaving him alone again someday, he looked almost puzzled. "You never will," he said. "Every rule I write has a trace of you in it. Every system I build knows your order." On my last birthday, he gave me something small, a silver pen engraved with the words, "Verified by Love." I asked him why. He said, "Because your handwriting started it. Everything I built came from the way you documented truth. You showed me that proof isn't cold, it's a form of care." That night, as the ocean pressed softly against the shore, I opened the old binder one last time. Its pages were brittle, the ink fading. The first entries were frantic. December 24th, left child on porch. No contact since. Maintaining safety. I touched the handwriting like it belonged to someone else. In a way, it did. That woman was surviving, not living. She had no idea her fear would one day become a blueprint for courage. Noah came in quietly, carrying a blanket. "You're reading again," he said. "Remembering," I answered. "It's different." He smiled faintly. "You taught me to remember in order. That's how things stay real." We sat there, listening to the waves, the kind of silence that only exists between two people who have said everything and need nothing more. Before I went to bed, I asked him to promise me one thing. Don't let the world turn this into a story about triumph. Make it about truth. Real truth, the kind that doesn't need to shout. He nodded. "That's already the story, Grandma. You wrote the first line." That night, as I drifted towards sleep, I thought of all the times I had doubted the world's fairness. Yet here it was justice, not in courtrooms or headlines, but in the shape of a boy who had become a man, still carrying the blue cup that once symbolized safety. In the morning, he'd go back to his work, and I'd stay by the sea, waiting for the light to rise over the horizon he built. I knew the world would keep moving, messy and beautiful and cruel. But somewhere inside that noise, my grandson had written a new code, one that didn't erase, didn't lie, didn't forget. And that, I realized, was the truest proof of love there could ever be. When I woke up that morning, the light coming through my curtains felt different, paler, softer, almost weightless. The ocean was calm. The air smelled faintly of salt and lemons from the tree Noah had planted by the porch. It was one of those rare mornings when nothing hurt, not even the memories. I made tea and sat by the window, the same way I had every morning for years. The blue cup was still there, though my hands trembled when I held it now. On the table lay a stack of letters, thank you notes from families the foundation had helped, reports from Horizon's newest offices, updates about research teams Noah had formed in Europe. He was changing the world in quiet, methodical ways, the same way he once changed his own fate. By noon he arrived late, which was unusual. His hair was longer, his jacket covered in sand. "You look like you fought the sea," I said, smiling. He smiled back. that rare, small curve of the mouth that was worth 1,000 words. "The tide came in faster than I thought," he said, placing a small box on the table. "This is for you." Inside was a watch, simple, elegant, with a soft ticking sound that seemed to blend with the rhythm of the waves. "So you'll always know what time it is," he said. "I've never forgotten," I told him. "I've just learned not to measure it by loss." He nodded, as though he understood something deeper beneath the words. For a while, we sat in silence. Then he began telling me about a new project software that could read facial microexpressions to help nonverbal children communicate emotions. He wanted to test it with the families the foundation supported. "If it works," he said, "kids like I was won't be invisible anymore." I watched him talk, animated but calm, and I thought of the boy who once rocked on my living room floor, terrified of noise, terrified of change. Now he was teaching the world how to listen. When he left that evening, he lingered by the door. "I'll come tomorrow," he said. "We'll go to the lighthouse. You've never been inside." "I'll be here," I promised. That night, I couldn't sleep. The sea was restless again, whispering against the glass. I went to my desk and began to write, not reports or records this time, but something personal. "If stories are proof of living," I wrote, "then mine is already verified." I left the binder open, my handwriting looping slower than before. The next morning, I woke before dawn. The light was blue, the kind of light that doesn't belong to any hour. I brewed tea and sat with my binder one last time, tracing the words until they blurred. I wasn't sad, I was ready. When Noah arrived that afternoon, the house was quiet. My chair faced the window, the tea gone cold beside me. The waves outside had settled into their steady rhythm again, as though the world knew it needed to be gentle. He didn't cry right away. He sat down in the chair across from mine, hands folded in his lap, breathing in that careful, measured way of his. When the paramedics came, he refused to leave the room. "She's still here," he said softly. "She always will be." Later, he found the open binder on my desk. On the final page I had written, "Truth doesn't die with the body that carried it. It multiplies in every person it touched. You were my proof, Noah. Live accordingly." For weeks afterward, he worked in silence. No meetings, no interviews, no press. Then one evening, he appeared at the beach with a small wooden box. He scattered my ashes into the sea, one handful at a time. "She believed order could heal chaos," he said quietly. She was right. Months passed before he returned to public life. When he finally did, it wasn't for an award or a headline, it was for a lecture at a university. He spoke not as a prodigy, but as a man shaped by truth. "My grandmother taught me that stories save lives," he told the audience. "Not because they're perfect, but because they're proof that someone cared enough to write them down." He paused, looked out at the students and added, "I'm still writing." After the lecture, one of his employees found him alone outside, sitting on a bench, staring at the horizon. "Are you all right, Noah?" they asked. He nodded. "She used to say the ocean keeps its promises," he said. I think she was talking about time. The foundation grew even larger in the years that followed. A new scholarship was established in my name for educators working with autistic children. On the plaque outside the Horizon headquarters, beneath his company logo, Noah added a single line in silver, "For Vivian Cole, who turned fear into proof and proof into love." Visitors often asked about it, and he would tell them, "That's where every story begins." Sometimes, late at night, when the servers hummed and the office was empty, he would hear it, the faint sound of waves from a recording he'd made the day he scattered my ashes. He kept that file on every computer he owned, a quiet reminder that some patterns never end. He lived his life the way I raised him to ordered, precise, compassionate, but he never forgot the truth that built him. Every time he signed a contract, helped a client, or hired someone new, he'd touch the watch on his wrist and whisper, "Verified." Years later, when Horizon's 50th anniversary arrived, he spoke again before a crowd of hundreds. He was older now, lines around his eyes, but still steady, still clear. "Everything I built came from one decision," he said. "A woman chose to believe that order could protect love. She was right. Every line of code I've written since has been a continuation of her handwriting. The audience rose in applause, but he didn't bow. He only smiled, a rare, small smile that reached his eyes this time. And somewhere, beyond the bright stage lights, beyond the noise of the crowd, he could almost hear the sound of waves breaking gently on the shore. It was the same sound that had once filled a quiet kitchen, the same rhythm that began everything. A pattern continuing, proof eternal. 20 years after my death, people still spoke my name, but not as a memory. It lived in plaques, in scholarships, in the title of a foundation that had become larger than even Noah once imagined. The Vivian Institute for Justice and Cognitive Inclusion stood near the shoreline where our old beach house had been, its glass walls catching the morning light. Noah visited often. He was in his 60s now, his once dark hair flecked with gray. He had married a quiet woman named Emily, an artist who spoke with her eyes more than her words, and together they had a daughter, Clara. She was 17, all wild curls and fierce logic, her notebooks filled with diagrams and poetry side by side. When she asked about me, Noah never called me your great-grandmother. He always said, "She's the reason you exist." The world had changed. Technology no longer merely imitated understanding, it listened. The systems Noah designed decades ago had evolved into tools that could translate emotional nuance, detect deceit, and preserve unaltered records of truth. Governments, journalists, and families used them. There was almost no forgery left in the world, no false inheritance, no erased testimony. It was, in its strange way, the legacy of a frightened grandmother who once wrote everything down because she feared being forgotten. Yet for all his success, Noah carried a quiet ache. He rarely showed it, but sometimes at night, Emily would find him sitting by the sea outside their home, the same watch still ticking faintly on his wrist. "You think about her often," Emily said once. He smiled without looking up. "Every day. She made me real before the world did." One autumn afternoon, Clara came running into his office, holding a tattered binder she'd found in the archives. "Dad, look, her notes. You told me about them, but I didn't know they still existed." He turned pale when he saw it. The handwriting slanted, deliberate. A map of survival was unmistakable. "I thought it was gone," he whispered. "The ink had almost faded when I last saw it." Clara sat beside him as he opened it. Inside were the first pages, lists of dates, phrases, and medical notes. But further in, new words appeared, ones he had never noticed before. On a yellowing page, near the back, was a single line he didn't remember. "If you ever read this when I am gone, don't look for me in the past, look for me in what you build next." He closed the binder and took a deep breath. That night, for the first time in decades, he couldn't sleep. Instead, he opened his laptop and began writing not code, but a letter. "Dear Grandma," he wrote, "you were right about everything. Proof does not belong in courtrooms or screens, it belongs in people. I have spent a lifetime building systems that verify the world, but I realize now that what you taught me was how to verify love." He printed the letter, sealed it, and placed it in the same box that had once held her ashes. Then he drove to the institute and buried the box beneath the magnolia tree at the entrance, where students and researchers passed every morning. Months later, during the institute's annual memorial ceremony, Clara stood before the crowd for the first time. Her voice trembled slightly, but her eyes were clear. "My great-grandmother," she began, "believed that truth and love were the same force seen through different lenses. One defends, the other heals. Together they rebuild what was broken." She held up the binder, its pages now digitally preserved and projected behind her. "This," she said, "isn't a relic. It's a beginning." After the speech, Noah stood in the back of the room, unnoticed, letting her words wash over him. He realized then that legacy wasn't about being remembered, it was about being continued. Every person who carried that story forward was, in some small way, writing her back into existence. Later that evening, he walked down to the ocean, alone. The waves were steady, calm, much like the ones that had carried her ashes years before. He knelt down, touched the sand, and whispered, "You didn't just save me. You redefined what it means to survive." As he stood, a faint light appeared on the horizon, a drone carrying sensors for the new coastal preservation project. He watched it drift above the water, blinking softly, like a star keeping watch. In the years that followed, Horizon merged with humanitarian organizations and research networks around the globe. The technology, once born from fear and defense, became a bridge for empathy. Artificial intelligence learned not only to detect lies but to understand intention, emotion, and silence. When asked why he pursued that direction, Noah would always say, "Because my grandmother built the world's first system of truth with a pen, not a processor." When he turned 70, the Institute held an event in his honor. After the ceremony, he slipped away to the archives where the original binder was kept under glass. For a moment, he just stood there, tracing her handwriting through the glass with his fingertip. A young archivist noticed him and asked gently, "Mr. Cole, do you ever think she'd be proud of what you've done?" He smiled. "She already told me she was." That night, as he returned home, he found Clara waiting on the porch. "Dad," she said, "I've decided to study cognitive engineering. I want to make systems that help people remember the way she helped you." He looked at her, saw the same quiet determination he once saw in his grandmother, and nodded. "Then you'll be writing the next chapter," he said. The next morning, Clara left early for her first research trip. On her desk, she found the silver pen that once belonged to Vivian. A note lay beside it, in her father's neat handwriting, "Proof continues with you." Years later, when Clara published her first paper, a new algorithm capable of detecting empathy through tonal variation, she dedicated it simply, "For the woman who wrote truth into being." By then, Noah was an old man, often sitting by the window watching the ocean rise and fall. The world outside buzzed with technology and light, but in the quiet of his home, time slowed to the rhythm of memory. One evening, as the sun sank into the horizon, he whispered, "She's still here." Emily, now frail and kind-eyed, touched his hand. "She never left," she said. He smiled faintly. "Neither will we." And when his heart finally gave out, it did so softly, as if in gratitude. Clara, finding him the next morning, didn't cry. She opened the window, letting the sea breeze sweep through the room. Then she sat in his chair and began to write her handwriting, careful, deliberate, alive. The story doesn't end when the truth is proven. It ends when love becomes proof itself. Outside, the ocean kept its rhythm. The same sound that began everything now carried it forward, each wave a continuation, each echo a heartbeat written across time. The pattern held, forever verified. In the end, the story of Vivian and Noah wasn't just about survival, it was about transformation. It began with abandonment and fear, and it ended with truth becoming a living legacy. A grandmother who once trembled under the weight of loneliness turned that fear into structure, order, and protection. Her handwritten notes became the blueprint for an entire generation of justice and empathy. And her grandson, once silent and misunderstood, used her lessons to rebuild the meaning of proof itself, turning technology into a vessel for compassion and knowledge into a promise that no one would ever be erased again. Vivian's life teaches us something profound, that real strength is quiet, steady, and patient. It doesn't shout or demand recognition, it documents, preserves, and endures. Her love was not the dramatic kind that moves mountains, but the meticulous kind that builds them stone by stone. Every small act, every list, every record, every decision to keep going when it would have been easier to give up, became a brick in the foundation of a better world. Noah's journey reminds us that we carry our ancestors not in memory alone, but in action. Every time he chose truth over convenience, every time he created technology that healed rather than exploited, he was extending his grandmother's handwriting into the future. Together, they prove that legacy isn't about blood or fame, it's about integrity, compassion, and the courage to stand for what's right when no one is watching. For us today, the lesson is timeless. The smallest acts of care can ripple beyond a lifetime. When you take the time to write something down, to protect someone vulnerable, or to choose honesty over ease, you're not just doing good, you're building proof that goodness still exists. And someday, someone you'll never meet might find strength in what you leave behind. That is how love outlives time. So ask yourself, what kind of proof are you leaving behind? Is it built from fear or from love? I'd love to hear your thoughts. If you were to leave one thing behind to prove your love to future generations, what would it be? A letter, a story, a memory, a lesson? Share your answer in the comments so we can all reflect together. And if this story touched you, please consider subscribing to the channel. It helps us keep bringing you heartfelt stories about family, justice, and second chances. Your support truly keeps this work alive.